Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, let's continue from the top of page 132 in the Safar book. So I'll read it and we'll explain it and we'll go along. So if you follow in the book, that'll probably be great. So, the Muslims gained an enormous amount of booty as Hawazin had come up with all of their belongings. Many were taken as prisoners and countless camels came into the hands of the Muslims. So booty means like treasure or loot. Yeah, so it's kind of like the prizes you get from winning a war. So because the Hawazin had come with all of their stuff into the battle, okay, the Muslims have got all of this. Now, just before we move on, if we remind ourselves on this map here, remember if I do the Muslims in black, so the Muslims had set off through Mecca into the valley of Hunain, yeah? And then if you remember, the Muslims went in, they were initially repelled because the Sahabas got very, very, you could say maybe slightly arrogant, but obviously they got very confident, probably is a better word to use, and so they like marched without the Prophet ﷺ's orders. However, as we know, the Prophet ﷺ came back and he ordered them, okay, look, instead of getting attacked by these people who were in the mountains where the two tribes which we'll come to had set up ambushes, he said, right, send some armies out that way, and he sent some of them through there, and eventually they defeated the enemy. Now, if you remember, there were two tribes which made up this. So one was the Hawazin, and the second one was, if you can remember, Banu Thaqif. Okay, let's carry on. Second paragraph. The incident at Hunain reminded the believers to always keep their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Allah has surely given you victory on many battlefields, and on the day of Hunain, remember when you were proud of your great number, but it did not benefit you at all, and the earth became narrow for you despite all its vastness. And then you turned away in flight. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down His tranquility, which means kind of peace, upon His messenger and upon the believers, and sent down forces which you did not see and punished those who disbelieved. And that is the punishment of the disbelievers. Yet after that, Allah still accepts the repentance of whom He wills, and Allah is most forgiving, most kind. I mean, that verse is so extraordinary, we could talk about that for literally hours, but I think the main point to take away from that is that Allah is saying that, look, and I think this is so applicable in today's modern life, that when we think that, don't be scared when people say to you, look, I have this, or I have that, or look, I've got this weapon, or I've got this many people. Everything in this life, it all boils down to the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? He gives powers to things, yeah, and He can take away powers from things. We don't do it in the Safar book, where when you learn about the expansion of the Islamic Khilafat of the Khulafa Rashidun, of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali radiallahu anhum, when you look at the expansion, sometimes the Muslims were fighting with barely any kind of actual weapons and kind of proper professional weapons, and they were going up against Roman and Persian armies which were equipped with the best weaponry that you could find at the time, but still they won. Why? Because these people had, the Muslims, the Sahabas, had that in their heart, that we don't care what the opposition has, as long as we have Islam and Allah in our hearts, yeah, Allah will give us victory. Yeah, and if He doesn't give us victory, well, there's a lesson to be learned there, and there's a reason why, because Allah is Al-Alim, the All-Knowing. Yeah, but I mean, that's such an important verse to think about. Yeah, really, really ponder about it, because it's really powerful in today's age where, Muslims are kind of being portrayed in a bad way. Don't ever give up hope. Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come and help us at the end of the day, as long as we try and help ourselves. Yeah, and as long as we keep true Islam in our heart, which unfortunately isn't the case today. But once Muslims get that back, inshallah, Allah will put us and elevate our position in the world, inshallah. Okay, moving on. So the siege of Ta'if. Ta'if was a city that had a very strong and well-built fortress. It lay on a major trade route and for that reason contained plenty of resources. It was also the place whose people decade means 10 years, okay, not only rejected the message of the Prophet ﷺ, but turned him away after abusing and hurting him. Since they both shared the hatred against Islam, the remaining enemy fled the battlefield at Hunayn to Ta'if and locked themselves in the fortress. So Banu Thaqif and Hawazin, yeah, obviously they were from Hunayn, But obviously they'd been defeated and they knew that Ta'if didn't like Muslims. So they retreated back to Ta'if. And Ta'if was surrounded by thick walls. Okay? So it was like a fortress. So it's difficult to get into a fortress, so they thought they were safe behind it. Okay? And it's very, very interesting what happens now, as you'll see, because remember, you should know this when you're watching it, but we all know the infamous story of the Prophet ﷺ going 10 years back from this incident to talk to the people of Ta'if to accept them, call them to Islam, and then the leaders of Ta'if ridiculed the Prophet with their arrogance, told him to get out, and told the children on the streets to stone the Prophet ﷺ as he left. And obviously we know that his blood was filled with his shoes were filled with so much blood that his feet were clogged and stuck to his sandals. And we know also, if you look into the biography of Ibn Ishaq, you see the story of when he went into the garden and how he was nearing death, and then some of the Quraysh person who actually had the garden and saw the Prophet ﷺ nearly dying, actually offered him grapes and some cool drink. And it's just really, really heartwarming story, which I think everyone should try and read. Anyway, moving on, page 133. Okay, so Hawazin and Banu Thaqif have all gone into Ta'if. So the Prophet ﷺ advanced to Ta'if with his army and camped around the fortress. The siege continued for a number of days without it going either way. Arrows constantly kept falling on Muslims whenever they tried to attack the fortress. To force the retreating army to surrender, the Prophet ﷺ ordered the vineyards to be cut down. Vineyards is where you get grapes from. Okay. Seeing this, some of the men in the fortress surrendered and were set free by the Prophet ﷺ. However, a large group still remained in the fortress. With no progress, the Prophet ﷺ declared an end. Some of the companions, surprised, asked the Prophet ﷺ, "Shall we turn back before we have made them surrender?" The Prophet ﷺ replied that they may continue fighting in the morning. So they continued fighting and some of them got wounded. When the Prophet ﷺ told them again that the siege was over, this time they all agreed to turn back. Yeah. So the Muslims did get to Ta'if, okay, and they besieged it. Okay? So besieged means when you surround a city. So besiege, I think I spelled that wrong over there. Besiege means when you surround a city. So they surrounded it, but obviously the fortress was too big in Ta'if. So the Muslims retreated. Yeah, they retreated because there was no luck. And some of the Sahabas again showed a bit of overconfidence by saying, "Why are we going back for? We can do anything." The Sahab, I think the Prophet ﷺ was teaching them also about practicality here, which is something we should put in our life. That although we do believe in Allah, we believe that Allah will help us and He has power in everything. You have to be practical as well. Yeah, you have to try and use your intelligence to try and come up with ideas, and then expect Allah Azza wa Jal to help you. And so that was kind of a lesson for that. Okay, so carrying on. On the way home, the companions requested that the Prophet ﷺ curse Banu Thaqif. However, the Prophet ﷺ, being kind and merciful, instead supplicated, which means to make dua. "O God, guide Thaqif and bring them to us." This is exactly what happened as they returned from Ta'if. A group from the enemy, declaring that they had embraced Islam, came to the Prophet ﷺ pleading for their prisoners and wealth to be returned. By then, the Prophet ﷺ had already distributed a lot of the spoils of war. So what happened is they retreated. The Prophet ﷺ made dua that obviously the companion asked the Prophet ﷺ that, "Can you make dua to curse Banu Thaqif?" And the Prophet ﷺ said no. He said, "I'm going to make dua that Allah Azza wa Jal still calls them towards Islam." Yeah? And then what happens is one of the enemy comes from Ta'if and says, "Look, we've all accepted Islam. The prisoners which you took in the previous wars here at Hunayn, can you give them back because we've accepted Islam now?" So let's see what happens next. To lead by example, the Prophet ﷺ announced that his share of the spoils of war will be returned. So the Prophet said, "I'll give back what I took as booty, as a treasure." The companions followed this example and returned a lot of the wealth and released the captives to their families. However, there were some who did not take the option of giving back their share. The Prophet ﷺ gave them an option that if you want to, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. So the Prophet ﷺ instructed everyone to give back their share, and in return offered to give them 6 times as much in share from the next booty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides them. Hearing this promise, they all willingly gave up their shares back to Hawazin. The Prophet ﷺ also gave each captive a garment as a gift to take back. So the Prophet ﷺ told the Sahabas that, look, if you give back your treasure to the Hawazin, next time we capture something, I'll give you 6 times that amount. Okay? And the Prophet also gave all the captives from the Hawazin who he sent back to Ta'if, he gave them a garment as a gift. Yeah? This really shows the genius and the intelligence of the Prophet ﷺ, because he knew he needed Ta'if to be on his side. He needed the city of Ta'if to, stay steadfast in Islam. So he needed the Sahabas to give back those things which they took. And how did he do it? He gave the Sahabas a promise of more. He didn't go up to the Sahabas and say, right, Umar, whatever you took, here I'm taking it and I'm giving it back, and you have to give it back and you can't say anything against it. He said, no. He said, look, I want you to give it back, but if you give it back, I'll give you 6 times as much the next time. So what's the Prophet ﷺ done by doing this? He's made both sides happy. Yeah. So the Sahabas are happy, and so are the Hawazin, because the Hawazin got their captives and their family members back, and the Sahabas are happy because they're going to get 6 times more the next time. So it's really the genius of the Prophet ﷺ we see in this event. And this book, obviously there's only 3-4 pages on it, but if you read Seerah books, there's so much more in-depth knowledge you can get about it. It's really, really brilliant. I'm not going to read through the lessons because I think you guys are clever enough to be able to read and understand it. Obviously, if you have any questions about any of the topics, just put it down in the comments underneath the appropriate video. So I hope that makes sense. If you need any help, obviously leave a comment. You can always ask me when we do our lessons as well. Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.